The hidden monster, Chevy's 396 L78. In 1965, Chevrolet quietly released a monster, an engine so aggressive, so overbuilt, it threatened their own future. It wasn't marketed, it wasn't hyped. In fact, Chevy tried to hide it. They called it the L78, but what they built was a street-legal weapon, and what they did next, they buried it. This is the forgotten story of the 396 turbojet, a big block so powerful it had to be underrated, on purpose. The specs alone were enough to scare the competition. 396 cubic inches, solid lifters, forged internals, 11-to-1 compression, and in its first year, 425 horsepower. That was in 1965. And then, just 1 year later, the exact same engine was suddenly rated at 375. Same block, same heads, same camera, just a lower number. Chevrolet didn't change the engine. They changed the story. Why? Because this thing wasn't just fast. It was too fast. See, the L78 wasn't just another big block. This engine had racing bones. It had a Holley 780 cubic feet per minute carb, heavy-duty crank, high-lift cam, and performance headers. And in real-world dyno tests, these engines were pushing well over 425 horsepower, sometimes closer to 460 with mild bolt-ons. Chevy knew this, and they panicked, because now insurance companies were watching, lawmakers were watching, and GM wasn't supposed to be racing. Since 1957, the AMA racing ban had kept GM out of factory-backed motorsport. Officially, unofficially, everyone else was cheating. Ford, Mopar, even AMC. But GM, they had too much to lose, so they played a different game. They silenced their own performance. They didn't cancel the L78. They just turned down the volume. On the brochures, on the dyno, in the press. Make no mistake, this was a calculated cover-up, because the L78 was outperforming everything, even Chevy's own flagship engines. The dyno deception. Here's the dirty secret no one at GM wanted you to know. Chevy didn't just lower the horsepower number, they rigged the tests. In 1966, when they re-rated the L78 to 375 horsepower, they didn't test it as is. They used restrictive exhaust manifolds, undersized air filters, even retarded the ignition timing. Why? To make it look weaker than it was. Dyno operators were reportedly told to run engines as tuned for longevity, not for performance. And when internal engineers pushed back, they were ignored or reassigned. But it gets crazier. Some claim GM even had multiple versions of the L78 being shipped, some with lower lift cams or smaller carbs to keep insurance auditors happy. But the ones built for certain dealers or special customers, those had the real deal, the full 425-plus horsepower monster, a two-tier system, all hiding under one RPO code. Here's the real kicker. This engine wasn't just fast, it was efficient. It was cheaper than the 427, more reliable, easier to build. It made similar power in a smaller package. And that scared GM more than any competitor. So instead of celebrating it, they ghosted it. No ads, no factory drag packages, no NASCAR. It was only available in street cars, Chevelle, Camaros, Novas. And only if you knew exactly what you were ordering. But word got out. And in the underground racing scene, the L78 became a legend. If you had one in a lightweight Nova, you ruled the streets. It didn't idle smooth. It didn't drive soft. But if you wound it past 6,000 RPM, it was terrifying, even to the driver. Camaro SS, Chevelle SS, Nova SS. If it had the L78, it didn't need a badge. People knew when it pulled up. And when the light turned green, you knew you were already beat. In 1968, a letter was circulated internally at GM, written by a mid-level powertrain analyst who warned, "We are knowingly publishing false horsepower numbers to suppress public scrutiny. The L78 poses a legal and moral risk." The letter never made headlines. It was buried, just like the engine. But some say it triggered quiet investigations, not from the government, but from GM's own legal team. Because by underrating power, Chevy wasn't just fooling rivals. They were also skirting regulations, avoiding insurance surcharges, and selling fire-breathing drag motors under the guise of daily drivers. It was corporate espionage against themselves. They created a monster, then built an alibi. People say the L78 was banned. But that's not true. It was hidden, never advertised properly, never raced officially, never praised by GM. Because if they admitted how powerful it was, they'd have to answer questions about insurance fraud, about false marketing, about internal sabotage. So instead, they let it die quietly in 1970. No send-off, no farewell, just silence. Today, real L78 cars are holy grails, especially Novas and early Camaros. They're hard to clone, harder to fake, and nearly impossible to find unmolested. They weren't bought by collectors. They were bought by street racers, people who didn't care about rarity. They just wanted to win. And the L78, it delivered every time. So next time you see a Chevelle or Nova at a show, don't just look at the paint. Look under the hood. If it's got solid lifters and a big holly carb, you might be staring at a piece of forbidden history. The L78 wasn't banned. It was buried. And sometimes, the engines they try to erase are the ones that matter most. Like this story? Subscribe for more hidden horsepower, rare car conspiracies, and untold automotive history. And this was the forgotten monster Chevy tried to silence.